ఓపెన్ చేసి పెట్టుకోవాలి.
ఓపెన్ చేయాలా సార్? Good afternoon, all of you. So now come to loss of biodiversity. Another important topic, that is loss of biodiversity. So before we are going to discuss loss of biodiversity, so come to previous topic also, right? So what it is, Rivet-Popper hypothesis. So what is the Rivet-Popper hypothesis? See, that Rivet-Popper hypothesis concept was explained by the Rivet-Popper hypothesis explained by the Alexander, right? So one second. So come to previous topic on Rivet-Popper hypothesis. So what about Rivet-Popper hypothesis? See that Rivet-Popper hypothesis concept related to biodiversity actually, right? So how that species, how that Rivet-Popper hypothesis related to biodiversity? So why that species diversity is essential? So well, because in Rivet-Popper hypothesis, that scientists compared that entire ecosystem with aeroplane. Entire ecosystem with aeroplane. It means, see, when we remove one bolt or rivet from the minor part of the aeroplane, right, that damage not occurs. Damage not occurs. But when we remove one bolt or nut from the important part of the aeroplane, like wing of the airplane, so that entire aeroplane leads to crash. In the same way, in ecosystem also, so when we remove normal plants or normal species from the ecosystem damage not occurs. But critical species or important species or key species, when we remove from the ecosystem, that entire ecosystem leads to damage. How so? See, for example, tertiary consumers. The tertiary consumers are critical species or key species. So when we remove that tertiary consumers from the ecosystem, like spinodon, tiger, all right, like endemic plants or endemic animals. So the type of tertiary consumers, when we remove from the ecosystem, so entire ecosystem leads to damage and disturbance. Why? Because so tertiary consumers, whenever disappeared from the ecosystem, secondary consumer number increases. So when secondary consumer number increases, so primary consumer numbers totally utilized by the secondary consumers, right? So slowly primary consumers completely disappeared from the planet. So there is no food material for the secondary consumers. Slowly they also leads to death. So it means entire ecosystem leads to damage or disturb when that critical species or important species or key species so removed from the ecosystem. Right. So one of the estimation, so around 1/4 species of the planet completely ready to disappear within 30 years. Within 30 years, around 75% of the species ready to disappear from the planet within 100 years. So according to one estimation, right? So now come to second, another important topic, that is loss of biodiversity, right? So how loss of biodiversity takes place? What are the major causes for loss of biodiversity? We'll see one by one, right? So species extinction takes place due to various human activities, right? So species extinction. So species extinction occurs due to human activities. So due to various human activities. So that species extinction is nothing but disappearance of species occurs due to various human activities, right? And one more thing, that acceleration of loss of biodiversity occurs on the planet due to various activities, right? So it means biological system declined. So declined means decreases. That biological system declined or decreases rapidly So rapidly due to various human activities, right? So best example for this is Pacific Islands. So better to take Pacific Islands. Pacific Islands. See, in Pacific Islands, due to various human activities, colonization and urbanization of human beings, around 2,000 native birds completely disappeared, right? So in Pacific Islands, due to colonization, so colonization is nothing but, so due to establishing houses, or due to construction of houses, so survival of human beings in that area, so around 2,000 native bird species completely extincted from the planet, disappeared from the planet. So due to colonization, due to urbanization, so due to colonization and urbanization in Pacific Islands, around 2,000 species, 2,000 types of species of birds. So 2,000 types of varieties of birds completely extincted or disappeared from the planet due to colonization and urbanization in Pacific Islands. So best example for this, right? So according to IUCN red lists. So according to IUCN red lists, 2004 estimation. See the data related to 2004 actually. Sir, what is red list, sir? So endangered species, extincted species information published in red data book actually. So red data book. See, in that red data book, endangered species, endangered means, so they are ready to disappear from the planet, and extincted. So that extincted and endangered species information published in a red data book. So that red data book published by the IUCN. What is the IUCN? International Union for Conservation of Nature. Red list 2004 data, around 784 species completely extincted from the planet. In last 400 years. Say around how many species extincted from the planet here? So according to red list, 784 species extincted from the planet in last 500 years. Right? So in that, 338 vertebrates. So 338 species, 338 varieties of species are vertebrates, and 359 types of species are invertebrates. See here, so totally 784 species extincted in last 100 years. In that, 338 species are vertebrates, 359 species are invertebrates, 87 types of species are plants. It means totally 784 species extincted in last 400 years, right? So in last 20 years, so around 27 species extincted. 27 species extincted. Right? It means in last 20 years, 27 species extincted. So around 784 species extincted in last 400 years. In that, 338 species vertebrates, 359 species of invertebrates, 87 species of plants. So, for example, some recently extincted organisms are dodo. So one of the bird, it is similar to swan actually, right? Dodo, quagga. So dodo, quagga, Thylacine, thylacine. So it is similar to fox actually, right? Thylacine, one of the animal, quagga, dodo, Stela sea cow, Stela sea cow. So Stela sea cow, one of the fish, one type of fish. Stela sea cow, thylacine, quagga, dodo. Then Bali, Zavan, Caspian. Caspian, right? These are tiger varieties, tiger species, right? Tiger species, Bali, Javan, Caspian, tiger species. Stela sea cow, one type of ocean animal it is, right? It is similar to fish actually, right? So thylacine, like what it is, fox type of animal. Then quagga, right? It appears like zebra actually, right? Then dodo one type of bird actually, right? So recently extincted organisms, recently disappeared organisms on the earth is dodo, quagga, thylacine, stilosico, bali, zavan, caspian. Important that examples. And one more thing, say around 550 organisms are ready to disappear from the planet. Right? So, sorry, 1550 organisms are ready to disappear from the planet. So, 15,550. So, 15,550 species ready to disappear from the planet. Right? So these are already extincted organisms, already disappeared organisms. But so around 15,550 species are ready to disappear from the planet. Right? So in that 12% of birds, 12% of total birds. Right? So 12% of birds, in total bird species, around 12% of birds are ready to disappear from the planet. So 23% of mammals. So 23% of mammals and 32% of amphibians. Right? And 31% of gymnosperms. Gymnosperms ready to disappear from the planets, right? So in the material they given 15,500 species ready to disappear. Okay, so nearly 15,550 species ready to disappear from the planet in that. So 12% of birds, 23% of mammals, 32% of amphibians, then 31% of gymnosperms. Right? And compared to pre-human history, right? Pre-human life, around 100 to 1,000 times, 100 to 1,000 times actually, 1,000 times that species extinction accelerated. Species extinction accelerated around 100 to 1,000 times when we compare with pre-human life. And one estimation, so around 50% of the species, another estimation, around 50% of the species extincted within 100 years. Within 100 years, right? So it's a brief introduction of loss of biodiversity. Correct? See that species extinction, of course, due to human activities, various human activities only. And the biological system completely declined rapidly. And example for this is Pacific Islands. Due to colonization and urbanization of Pacific Islands, around 2,000 species of birds which can survive in that Pacific Island completely disappeared from the planet. Then according to IUCN red lists, see that red list published by the IUCN. So what it is? International Union for Conservation of Nature. So published red listed data in the red data book actually. So what type of information it provides a red data book? So endangered species and extincted species. Endangered means ready to disappear. Extincted means already disappeared, right? So that animals, that plants information provided by the red data bookmark. So according to 2004 data, so 784 species already extincted in last 400 years, right? So that 784 types of animals, types of plants and animals already extincted from the planet, right? So in that, so these are the numbers. So in last 20 years, 27 species extincted. Example, dodo, quagga, thylacine, stela, sea cow, boli, zawan, caspian. And one estimation, so nearly 15,550 species ready to disappear from the planet in that 12% birds, 23% mammals, 32% amphibians, 31% gymnosperms. And one estimation, around 100 to 1,000 times that species extinction, right? Extinction occurs around 100 to 1,000 times. So when we compare with pre-human life. And one more estimation, nearly 50% of the species extincted within 100 years. Within 100 years. Okay, so what are the reasons for cause of loss of biodiversity? So what are the major reasons? What are the causes for loss of biodiversity? We will see one more. So that number important. See, Rivet Popper hypothesis is nothing but so that scientist compared the ecosystem with airplane only, right? The Rivet is nothing but bolt. So the Rivet Popper hypothesis explained by the Paul Ehrlich actually. Paul Ehrlich. So next come to causes for loss of biodiversity. Causes for loss of biodiversity. Causes for loss of biodiversity. So what are the major causes for loss of biodiversity? We will see one by one, right? So come to first one. First cause of loss of biodiversity is habitat loss and fragmentation. So second one, so overexploitation. Third one, invasion of alien species or foreign species. And last one, co-extinction. So first cause for loss of biodiversity, that is habitat loss and fragmentation. Habitat loss and fragmentation. Fragmentation. So first cause of loss of biodiversity is habitat loss and fragmentation. See, this is the primary reason for loss of biodiversity. Primary reason for loss of biodiversity. And for example, you can take deforestation. Deforestation. So deforestation like logging. Yes, logging is nothing but cutting of forest, cutting of trees. Logging, then burying, dwelling of forest. So burying, then another one, wetland. So conversion of wetland into cultivated land, right? So simply filling of wetlands. Filling of wetland. Yes, what is the meaning of filling of wetland? Wetland is nothing but ponds. streams, right? That ponds and streams totally converted into cultivated land. Cultivated land. And burning means dwelling of that forest. So mining in mining areas totally forested removed, forests removed, the trees removed for iron and for silver, for gold, right? So for in mining areas, totally forests are totally trees removed, right? We call it as burning of forest, then filling of wetlands, and logging. Logging is nothing but cutting of trees. And one more thing is ploughing. Ploughing of grassland. Grassland are some of the causes for loss of biodiversity, right? So this logging, burning, filling of wetland, ploughing of grasslands is the major cause for loss of biodiversity. It means, so whenever that wetland converted into agricultural land, so when that wetland converted into agricultural land, some species which can survive in that wetland completely disappeared, right? So when that wetland converted into agricultural land, so some species extincted. Right? And one more thing here, one estimation. So the tropical rainforest occupies 14% of the land area, right? So totally 14% of land area occupied by the tropical rainforest section. Tropical rainforest. Right? So totally tropical rainforest occupies 14% of the land area, but now it is reduced to more than 6%, right? So not more than 6%. So now not more than 6%. So not more than 6%. So that the tropical rainforest area occupied around 14% of the world's land area, but now it is less than 6% only. It means not more than 6% means exactly 6% or less than 6% only. So what is the major reason for that, sir? See, totally the forest area surrounded by the cultivated lands. Totally that forest area, tropical rainforest area surrounded by the cultivated lands, right? And towns and cities actually, right? So it is surrounded by the tropical rainforest surrounded by the cultivated lands and construction, buildings, concrete buildings, urbanization simply. Concrete buildings are simply urbanization, right? So due to urbanization and due to cultivated lands, so totally that forest area or forest patch completely decreases. And one more thing, so multiple species forest area also decreases by cultivating teak and salt trees. Right? So total forest area, that forest area removed and cultivated teak and salt trees actually, right? So cultivating teak and salt trees in that area also one of the reason for loss of biodiversity, right? So simply what is habitat loss and fragmentation, sir? For example, imagine around 2,200 kilometers of forest area is there. But due to urbanization or colonization in some particular areas, so complete plants and animals, right? Complete plants will be removed in one particular area. So what will happen? Totally produces extincted or disappeared in that planet. So primary consumers, secondary consumers, and tertiary consumers slowly migrated from that area to another area. Why? Because their habitat completely disappeared, right? So we call it as habitat loss and fragmentation, right? So that habitat loss and fragmentation, one of the reason for loss of biodiversity, right? Is it clear? Imagine around 2,200 kilometers of forest patch is there, forest area. So in that area, due to human activities, due to urbanization, so in one particular area, completely the plants are removed in that area. Right? When we remove the plants completely in that area, what will happen? There is no producers. The producers completely extincted in that area. Right? Slowly, that primary consumers and secondary consumers, it means other animals migrated from that area to other area. So what will happen there? So species diversity or biodiversity completely decreases. Is it clear? So for loss of biodiversity, one of the reason is habitat loss and fragmentation. Right? Now come to second, invasion of alien species. Invasion of alien species. So what it is, sir? Invasion. Invasion is nothing but introduction of alien species. Introduction of alien species. So due to human activities, so other organisms or other countries' organisms introduced it to the normal areas, introduced it to the countries, normal countries, right? For example, foreign countries or other countries' organisms wantedly be imported, right? We call it as introduction of other organisms or other country organisms, right? So introduction of other species or exotic species. So when we will introduce exotic species or non-native species or alien species to the country, so automatically native species or native plants completely disappeared, right? So best example for this is African catfish, right? Otherwise, Nile perch, one of the example for this. Nile perch. Better to take Nile perch. So one of the fish actually, Nile perch. So when we will introduce the Nile perch to the African lakes, see that African people introduced the Nile perch fish, predatory fish to the African lakes like Tanganyika, Malawi, Victoria. Tanganyika. So what it is lake name actually? Tanganyika, Malawi, and another one is Victoria. So these three are lakes in Africa. So that African people well introduced the predatory fish Nile perch into the African lakes like Tanganyika, Malawi, Lake Victoria, around 200 species. Around 200 native species and native fishes. And the two endemic fishes, these are native fishes and the two endemic fishes. So sea-chilled fishes completely extincted or disappeared from that area, from that lakes actually, right? So one of the example for invasion of alien species or introduction of exotic species is Nile perch. So the Nile perch is one of the predatory fish. So when the predatory fish introduced into the African lakes like Tanganyika, Malawi, and Victoria, so around 200 native fishes disappeared, right? Endemic fishes disappeared from that lakes. So one of the example for that. And better to take another example. Clarius garipinus, African catfish actually. And better to take another example. So another example is Clarius garipinus. Clarius garipinus. So what it is? Clarius gariepinus, African catfish. African catfish. So when that African catfish introduced into the natural lakes or local bodies, otherwise local lakes. So what will happen? So native catfishes completely disappeared or killed by the Clarius gariepinus. Correct? So another example. For non-native species or exotic species, Clarius gariepinus. So that Clarius gariepinus African catfish, when introduced into the local ponds or local lakes, so what will happen? The local catfishes completely extincted, right? So because the local catfish is food material for the African catfish or Clarius gariepinus. So these are some examples, Nile perch and Clarius gariepinus. But when we'll come to plants, so well-known plants are there. So what are the Eupatorium, one of the important plants, Terror of Bengal, right? Water hyacinth, another example. Then Parthenium hysteroporus, Lantana camera, variety camera, right? Those plants are also non-native plants. So other country plants. So when they introduce other country plants, what will happen? So they can survive. So they can survive and they can act as super weeds in our areas. Best example for that is Parthenium hysteroporus. Hysteroporus. So other name for Parthenium hysteroporus, carrot grass. So what is the disadvantage of Parthenium hysteroporus? It causes asthma, some respiratory disorders also, right? That pollen grains causes some respiratory disorders. So common name for Parthenium hysteroporus, carrot grass. So what is the disadvantage? So this Parthenium hysteroporus plant can survive in any condition, either it is saline condition, either it is mesophytic land, either it is xerophytic land. So in any conditions they can survive. And that too, they absorb maximum nutrients from the surrounding soil. So in that area, other plants cannot survive, right? Slowly, so that local species or local plants completely disappeared in that area so that Parthenium can survive. When that Parthenium plants can survive in one particular area, other plants cannot survive. They completely disappear. And one more, Lantana camara, right? One of the ornamental plant or show plant. So that ornamental plant and show plant also absorbs maximum nutrients from the surrounding soil. And one more plant, Terror of Bengal. You know very well, water hyacinth. Otherwise, we call it as Terror of Bengal. Right? Water hyacinth or Terror of Bengal. Or other name, Eichhornia. See that Eichhornia also non-native species or other species. So when we introduce that non-native species to the local lakes, what will happen? So rapidly, invasively, right? They spreads on the water bodies, and they completely consumes oxygen which is available in lakes, and it causes death of aquatic animals. And that too, it pollutes environment, it pollutes water, right? So it causes water pollution and causes death of animals. So that's the reason we call it as Terror of Bengal also. Eichhornia is also called as Terror of Bengal. So water hyacinth is also called as Terror of Bengal. And give one more example for this. So water Eupatorium, one more, Eupatorium, right? So these four plants are completely non-native. So that non-native species, when we introduce it into the natural resources, totally local species or native species completely disappeared. Right? So examples important. Some Nile perch, when introduced into the African lakes like Tanganyika, Malawi, Victoria, around 200 endemic fishes endemic fishes or native fishes completely disappeared or extincted. Sea shell fishes extincted. And Clarius gariepinus, African catfish, when introduced to the local ponds, so local catfish is completely extincted. Right? And non-native plants also. When non-native plants introduced to the local ecosystems, right? Local plant species also disappeared from the planet. So these are, it is another reason for loss of biodiversity, right? So introduction of non-native species or invasion of alien species is the another reason for loss of biodiversity. So here two causes for loss of biodiversity. First one, habitat loss and fragmentation. Second one is invasion of alien species. So now come to third reason again. Third reason, what it is? Overexploitation. Right. So third cause for loss of biodiversity, that is overexploitation. So overexploitation. Right. So what is overexploitation? So overuses or misuse of bioresources. Right. So overuses or misuse of bioresources. So bioresources also one of the reason for loss of biodiversity. For example, so you can take logging as usual, logging, hunting of animals. See, logging also same thing. Logging also one of the reason for extinction of tree species, and hunting of birds, hunting of animals, tigers. So it is also one of the reasons, right? So logging, hunting, poaching, right? Logging, hunting, poaching, and dwelling of forest area. Also, reasons for loss of biodiversity. Why? Because overusage here. So logging also overusage of trees, hunting also overusage of animals, various animals, poaching. Poaching is nothing but illegal uses of plants and animals, and dwelling. So dwelling also, illegal dwelling also one of the reason for cause of loss of biodiversity, right? The best example for this is steelers, sea cow, and passenger pigeon, right? So steelers, sea cow, and passenger pigeon. See, the steelers, sea cow, and passenger pigeon extincted in last 500 years. Extincted in last 500 years. Due to overusage only. Right? So due to overusage, the steeler, sea cow, and passenger pigeon completely extincted in last 500 years. And one more thing. So recently we are using nylon nets and mortar boards for collecting fishes, right? So for capturing fishes, right? So for capturing fishes, nowadays we are using nylon nets and mortar boards. So maximum types of ocean species or ocean animals, right, completely extincted due to overusage only. Right? So due to overusage, So maximum types of fishes completely disappeared from the oceans. So it is also one of the example for over-exploitation or over-usage of animals, right? And another reason for this is co-extinction, right? Co-extinction. So what is co-extinction? So it is a process of extinction of one organism also leads to extinction of other organism or dependent organism, right? So it is a process of extinction of one particular organism resulting into extinction of other organism. It means simply, so whenever one particular organism disappeared from the planet, automatically dependent organism, right? So the living organism which depends on that particular organism also disappears, right? We call it as co-extinction. So best example for this is parasitic relationship, host and parasitic relationship. Best example for this, host and parasites, host and parasitic relation. See, whenever host organisms disappeared from the planet, automatically that parasitic organism also disappeared, right? So we call it as co-extinction. Co-extinction. So when host organism completely disappeared from the planet, so automatically the dependent organism or parasite also completely disappeared or extincted from the planet. So totally how many reasons, how many causes, what are the causes for loss of biodiversity? So first one, habitat loss and fragmentation, right? So when human activities fragments that forest area or forest patch, so automatically that species extinction also takes place, loss of biodiversity also takes place. Best example, Amazonian rainforest. So totally 14% of the world's land area occupied by the tropical rainforest, but now, so that area is more than 6%, not more than 6%. So due to human activities only, due to cutting of forest only, so that forest patch area completely disappeared. Automatically biodiversity loss also takes place now. Right? Second reason. So introduction of non-native species. When we will introduce non-native or exotic or alien species. Hey, alien species are nothing but other country species. So when we introduce it to the local ponds or local ecosystems, so that local species completely disappeared from the planet. Second reason. Third reason is overusage of bioresources like plants and animals. So that overusage of plants and animals also one of the reason for loss of biodiversity, for paper purpose, right? For food purpose, right? We are using large number of plants and large number of animals, right? So automatically some species completely extincted from the planet, right? So then co-extinction. When host organism disappeared, when host organism completely utilized by the human beings, automatically dependent organisms disappeared from the planet. All right, these are the causes for loss of biodiversity or reasons for loss of biodiversity. Just four: habitat loss and fragmentation. Then second one, introduction of non-native species. Third one, overexploitation and overuses. And fourth one, co-extinction. So next one, why we should conserve biodiversity. What is the role of biodiversity, right? So what is the role of biodiversity here? So that biodiversity is essential to the human life or human beings, right? It is useful to human beings or human life. And it is also plays an important role in human welfare. So how that biodiversity is useful to human beings? So for example, broadly utilitarian arguments. narrowly utilitarian arguments, and ethical arguments are there, right? See, it means it plays an important role at various levels to the human beings. So, for example, narrowly utilitarian arguments, broadly utilitarian arguments, and ethical arguments are there, right? So, what are broadly utilitarian arguments are? So, we can't estimate so that ecological services, we can't estimate that organism services. We call them as broadly utilitarian arguments. So narrowly utilitarian arguments means so that the services value is very less, right? So for example, daily we're using some living organisms as food purpose. We're using some animals and some plants also. So for food purpose, for medicinal purpose, right? For industrial purpose, we're using some organisms, right? So it comes under narrowly utilitarian arguments. But broadly utilitarian arguments, so we can't estimate that ecological services value like pollination, carbon dioxide fixation, right? And oxygen production. So that type of services comes under broadly utilitarian arguments. And ethical arguments. So what type of ethical arguments are there? What type of broadly utilitarian arguments are there? What type of narrowly utilitarian arguments comes under role of biodiversity? We will see in next class.
Okay. So good evening, students. So welcome you all to another session, right? So in this session, we'll be taking up with a new chapter, as I've already told you in the previous class, right? So till the previous session, we have completely done with our topic called as the organic evolution. And today we'll be taking up with another chapter from unit number 8, which is biology and human welfare. So under this particular unit called biology and human welfare, we'll be taking up with the first chapter in that, which is called as the human health and disease. Right. So one of the interesting topics we have in this particular syllabus, right? So we'll be talking about human health and disease, right? So let's just begin with this topic called as the human health and disease. Right. So we'll be taking up with this chapter, which is called as the human health and disease. As I've already said, right? So unit number 8 in our books, right? Biology and human welfare. Under that, chapter number 8 is this chapter, which is called as the human health and disease. Right. So in this chapter, we'll actually be dividing the entire chapter into 4 parts, and we'll be taking up with different parts in each of the topic. Right. So in the first part, we'll be dealing with the common diseases that are usually seen in case of humans. Right. So diseases which are caused by several microorganisms infection. Right. So diseases which are caused by viruses, diseases which are caused by bacteria, diseases caused by fungi, diseases caused by protozoan, and diseases caused by elemental organism. Right. So these diseases will be taking up in our first part, which we call it as the common diseases in the human beings. Right. So pertaining to this disease, we'll be talking about the causative organism of each of the disease. Right. In each category, we'll be taking up at least 1 or 2 diseases in detail. Right. So in that, we'll be taking up with the causative organism of that particular disease. Right. Then we'll be talking about the mode of infection of the disease, how the disease would be transmitted to the person, or how the person would get infected with that particular microorganism, the mode of infection. That is the second thing what we'll be talking about. And the third thing what we'll be talking about is the symptoms that are associated with each of the disease. Right. So 3 things we'll be taking up with each category of the diseases what we are going to see. Most of the common diseases what we have come across and what we'll be commonly listening to it. Right. Some of the disease at least once in a lifetime we would have experienced, or we would have got that particular disease. So we'll be talking about those particular diseases. Right. So pertaining to the diseases or common diseases in case of humans, we'll be taking up with the causative organism of the disease, number 2, the mode of infection of the disease, and number 3, the symptoms that are associated with that particular disease. So this would be the first part in our chapter, the human health and disease, what we'll be studying. Right. So the second part what we'll be talking about is another interesting topic, which is called as the immunity. Right. Or we can call it as the immune system. So we'll be taking up with complete details pertaining to our immune system, how our immune system is actually functioning. I hope all are familiar with the immune system. Right. In our previous standard classes also, we would have spoken about a lot of things about immune cells which are present in our body. So we have mostly the WBCs, which play a very important role in the defense mechanisms of our body. Right. So in the second part of this chapter, we'll be dealing completely with regards to the immunity, or rather the immune system present in our body. So what are the immune cells that are present in our body? How are they associated with the other cells? Right. How do they act whenever we get infected with any sort of a pathogen or any sort of microorganism? How exactly do they work in bringing about the destruction of this microorganism, protecting our human system? Right. So entire details will be taking up in the second topic, which is called as the immune system or the immunity in the humans. The third topic what we'll be taking up in this particular chapter is with regards to cancer. Right. Another interesting topic here. Right. So we'll be talking a few things with regards to cancer. Right. Just the basics of cancer, because we know cancer is a very vague topic. Right. So it takes a lot of time to actually go through each and every topic. So we'll be covering the basics of cancer. Right. So what is cancer? How is it caused? Right. So what are the symptoms associated with the cancer? What are the different stages of cancer? And along with that, we'll be studying also about how we go on with the treatment of cancer. How do we identify the cancer, as well as how do we go in and treat cancers? Right. So different types of cancers all we have. So we'll be talking about 1 or 2 different types of cancers also in our third topic pertaining to cancer. And in the last topic in this particular chapter, we'll be dealing with something called as addictions. Right. So we'll be dealing with addiction. I hope all are familiar with the term addiction. Right. Repeated usage of the same thing again and again. So we have different types of addictions which have been reported. One is called the drug addiction. Some people are completely addicted to drugs. Right. So we'll be talking about drug addiction. Second topic under that, we'll be talking about something called as alcohol addiction, alcoholism. And the third topic under this subtopic, what we'll be taking up is with something called as the tobacco addiction. Right. So drug addiction, tobacco addiction, as well as alcohol addiction. So these are the things what we'll be taking up in addiction. So on a whole, this entire chapter, that is the human health and disease, will be studying it under different parts, right? So basically 4 important parts, in which the first part what we'll be taking up is pertaining to the common diseases that are seen in case of human beings. The second part is we'll be dealing with something called as the immunity, as well as the immune system, the cells associated with the immune system, and how our immune system actually brings about protecting the human system from any sort of infection. The third topic what we'll be taking up is with regards to cancer, right? The complete study, basic study, again I'm telling you, the basic study regarding cancer. And the last topic, the fourth one, what we'll be taking up is with something related to addiction, right? So some interesting topics we have in this particular chapter. So we'll go through it, each and everything, slowly, step by step, right? Now, in today's class, what we'll do is, we'll just take up the basis of this particular chapter, that is human health and disease, right? So what do we mean by health and what do we mean by disease? So these are the two basic terms what we will study today, right? So health and disease. So usually it appears to be like very simple terms what we usually come across, but scientifically speaking, how do we define health and how do we define a disease? What exactly do we mean by health and what exactly do we mean by a disease? So that we'll be taking up in today's class with regards to the introductory note pertaining to the topic called as human health and disease, right? So in continuation with this, let us first begin with something called as health, right? So let us talk a few things with regards to health. So what do we mean by the term health? So health is one of the most common term what we usually come across, right? So whenever a person is sick, we say that the health of a person is not good, right? The person is not feeling well, the person is unhealthy. But what do we mean by the term health? Or rather, how do we define health, right? So scientists say that health could be defined, right? Health could be defined as the complete sound state, or we can put it this way, health can be defined as the state of sound body and mind, right? It could be defined as how? The state of sound body and mind. Now, what do we mean by this? A state of sound body and mind. So, what do we mean by a state of sound body and mind? So, when we say sound body and mind, whenever we talk about health, we are actually referring to the body as well as the mind, the condition of our body, and not only the body, the condition of our mind also. That's the reason why one more scientist, he started defining, telling that the health could be defined as the state of physical as well as mental well-being of a person, right? So it is a condition of the physical well-being of a person, right? Physically, a person should be good, or physically a person should be fit, and at the same time, mentally, that is psychologically also, a person should be good or fit. If a person is physically fit and psychologically or mentally fit, then we say that a person is said to be healthy, right? So how do we define health now? So health can be defined as the condition of or the state of being sound in body and mind. And not only this, right? And also, right? And also the degree of, or the extent of, or we can write it this way, the degree of how much they are, degree of free from illness, degree from which they are free from illness, degree from which they are free from illness. So this is what we mean by health. First thing is, it is something that is associated with body and mind. Important things what you need to remember, right? And again, it is also the extent by which they are free from any sort of illness. This is how we actually define health. So how do we define health now? So health can be defined as the condition or the state of body and mind and the degree from which they are free from any sort of illness. This is what we call it as health, right? So keeping this in view, now we can say that when do we say a person is healthy? When a person is physically fit, right? When we say physically fit, everything is normal, right? Everything is normal. The person does not have any sort of illness or any sort of sickness within them. Second thing, the person is said to be psychologically also fit. So only if a person is physically fit and psychologically fit, only then we say that a person is said to be healthy. Right? So this is what we mean by health. So when we say that everything is going on well, everything is fine. So what does that mean now? A person is physically fit and at the same time, a person is mentally fit. Right? That is psychologically fit. So psychologically, they are not being disturbed. Psychologically, there is no disturbances seen. At the same time, physically also, there are no disturbances seen in that particular person. Right? So this is how we actually start defining health. Right? Next, early Greek philosophers, right? Early Greek philosophers such as Hippocrates, right? So I'm just taking this down, taking it out, right? So we are dealing with something related to health. So what did the early scientists or early philosophers, what did they mean by health? So let us just get into a few historic background of things, right? So early Greek philosophers, right? Early Greek philosophers are such as Hippocrates, right? So early Greek philosophers such as Hippocrates, as well as several Indian Vedic medical experts. What did they actually mean by health? Right? So several Greek philosophers, right? Several Greek philosophers and several early Indian Vedic medical experts. Now, who are these Indian medical Vedic experts? They are nothing but Ayurvedicians. Right? At that point of time, Ayurveda was more commonly seen than the allopathic medicines what we actually used. Right. So those people, medical experts, as well as several Greek philosophers, right? Several Greek philosophers, they believed in one particular hypothesis, right? So let me tell you what is that particular hypothesis. They actually believed in one particular hypothesis. So what the hypothesis, what they believed was, right? They believed that whenever a person is normal, whenever we say that a person is healthy, it is because of the proper functioning of the body fluids present in the body of the individual. Right? Let me repeat it once again. Right? So what they believed is the proper health or the good health of a person is completely dependent on the proper functioning of the body fluids in the particular person. Right? So what did they mean? What did they say here? When we say a person is said to be healthy, it is completely dependent on the proper functioning of what? Proper functioning of the body fluids present in the body. So these body fluids were also called as humors, right? So the body fluids, they also started calling body fluids as humors, right? So the health of a person, what they said is the health of a person is said to be completely dependent on the proper functioning of the body fluids or humors present inside the body. So what do we mean by body fluids? What are the different body fluids that we have in our body? We have blood, we have plasma, we have serum, we have bile, right? So all these are nothing but some of the body fluids which are present. So those body fluids, they started calling it as human, right? So what they believed was, whenever we say that a person is said to be completely healthy, it is because of the proper functioning of this humus. Right. So they gave a name for this particular hypothesis. They started calling it as the good humor hypothesis. They started calling it as good humor hypothesis. Right. So what does the good humor hypothesis state? What does the good humor hypothesis state? It says that whenever a person is said to be healthy, it is completely because of the proper functioning of the body fluids or humors present in the body of that particular individual. That they gave it a name as good humor hypothesis. Right? That they started calling it as good humor hypothesis. Now they gave a simple example and they also added to it telling that any sort of deviation, right? Any sort of alteration right? Any sort of deviation or any sort of alteration from the proper or normal functioning of the body fluid would lead to the development of fever, right? Let me repeat it once again. What this further added to this good humor hypothesis is any deviation or any alteration from the normal functioning of the body fluids, right, it would lead to the development of fever, right? So for that they took an example. What example they gave is, in our body we have bile. Bile is actually considered as one of the humor or one of the body fluids inside our body, right? Now the bile, if we see, it is actually said to be green in color, right? So what they said is color changing of bile, right? So if bile, which is green, right, so green bile, if it changes to black bile, right? So if the green colored bile, if it changed to black bile, so why is this changing? Because of improper functions of the body. Because there is some sort of imbalance in the proper functioning of the body, what they said is, if the green bile is changing to black bile, right, because of improper functioning of the body, it would lead to the development of fever, right? It would lead to the development of fever. So what they believed is, any sort of alteration from normal functioning of this particular body fluid will lead to the development of fever. One example what they gave is, if the green bile which is present in the body, in our body, if it turns to black color, which they called it as black bile, because of because of improper functioning of some of the body parts, that would lead to the development of fever. This hypothesis also, right? So this hypothesis also, they gave a name for it. They started calling it as the black bile hypothesis. This was called as the black bile hypothesis, right? So what does the black bile hypothesis state now? Whenever the green bile turns into black bile. So why is the green bile turning into black bile? Because of improper functioning of some of the body parts, green bile is turning to black bile. Now, due to this discoloration or change in the color from green to black, it would lead to the development of fever, which will now make a person unhealthy, right? Which would now start making a person unhealthy. This they started calling it as the black bile hypothesis. This was the assumptions or belief which was given, which was actually seen in early Vedic medical experts as well as the early Greek philosophers such as Hippocrates. Right. So the good humor hypothesis as well as the black bile hypothesis. Right. So quickly going through what we have seen till now. Right. So early Greek philosophers such as Hippocrates and early Indian Vedic medical experts, they believe that the health of a person is completely dependent on the proper functioning of the body fluids. So these body fluids were also called as humors. Only if the humors are functioning properly, only if the body fluids are said to be functioning properly, only then a person would remain healthy. So this hypothesis, they started calling it as good humor hypothesis. Right. So one example what they gave is, any alterations in the body fluid or any deviation from normal functioning of body fluid, like if the green bile turns into black bile, which is caused because of some improper functioning of body parts, it would lead to the development of fever. It would lead to the development of fever. This they started calling as the black bile hypothesis. Right? Clear this so far? So good humor hypothesis as well as the black bile hypothesis. Right? So this was believed for several years after the scientists came up with this particular hypothesis, that is good humor hypothesis as well as the black bile hypothesis. This hypothesis was believed by several people at that point of time until there was the discovery of blood circulation. Right? So this theory was going on well and strong until the discovery of blood circulation. So any idea who discovered blood circulation? So let's get into that topic now. Right. So blood circulation was discovered by a scientist and a doctor by name William Harvey. Right. So the good humor hypothesis as well as black bile hypothesis remained popular until the discovery of the blood circulation, right? until the discovery of blood circulation by a scientist by name William Harvey. Right? So William Harvey is well known for his discovery because he was the one who discovered blood circulation. Dr. William Harvey, blood circulation. Right. So after the discovery of blood circulation, right? After the discovery of blood circulation by Dr. William Harvey, he started working on this good humor hypothesis. He wanted to show whether the good humor hypothesis is a valid hypothesis or no. So what he did was he made certain tests. He started testing people with green bile as well as people with black bile. So what he did was, what he observed was, even though the bile is green or black, right? Try to get this right, right? Even though the bile is green or black, right? The temperature of that particular individual remained constant. It was the same, right? So people with green colored bile as well as people with black colored bile, both of their body temperatures was exactly the same. So with that, he started disproving the black bile hypothesis, which was given by early Greek scientists, early Greek philosophers. That's how the black bile hypothesis as well as the good humor hypothesis was disproved. Right? That two theories, that is the good humor hypothesis as well as the black bile hypothesis, were actually valid for a long period of time till the discovery of blood circulation. Once the blood circulation was discovered by Dr. William Harvey, he was the one who started working on this good humor hypothesis. He identified that even though the bile of a person is black or green, it doesn't matter. The body temperature would remain constant. That means, what does that mean? What did they say in black bile hypothesis? If the green bile turns black, it would lead to the development of fever. So when we say fever, it is nothing but increase in the body temperature. But what William Harvey said was, even though the bile is green or black, it does not have anything to do with the rise in the temperature. The temperature of those particular individuals were same and constant. We can put it this way. It was actually the same rather than the term constant. It was the same. So that's how he started disproving the black bile hypothesis. So the black bile hypothesis was disproved by William Harvey upon the discovery of the blood circulation. Right, this is what we have. Now, later on, once the blood circulation was discovered, due to the advancements in modern biology, right, due to the advancements in modern biology, scientists now gave a very clear picture stating that all the body functions in the humans, right, all the body functions in the humans are regulated by two systems, Those two systems, they put it together and they started calling it as neuroendocrine system. Right? So they said that all the body functions in a particular individuals are being completely regulated by this particular system, what they call it as the neuroendocrine system. Now, what do we mean by neuroendocrine system? Two systems, the nervous system as well as the endocrine system, right? So we have studied about these two systems in detail in our previous year, right? In the first year, we spoke about the nervous system, what are the constituents of nervous system, how do they work, endocrine system, what are the constituents of endocrine system, how do they work, how these two are again interrelated to each other. So that also we have already discussed in detail in our previous year, right? So after the discovery of blood circulation, right, due to the advancements in biology, scientists now are very confident or very clear in stating that all the body functions in a particular individual is completely regulated by the neuroendocrine system. Now this neuroendocrine system, what again it does is, it starts or it achieves homeostasis. It achieves, the neuroendocrine system achieves homeostasis in the body, and also it is responsible for maintaining normal health in a particular person. Right? It is responsible for two things. So the neuroendocrine system is responsible for two things. One, it achieves homeostasis in the body. So what do we mean by homeostasis in the body? It is nothing but normal balance in the body. Right? So it balances everything in the body. Only if all the functions in the body are said to be balanced, only then a person's health is said to be normal or a person's health is said to be good, right? So this is what they said, right? So what did the scientists say after the advancements in biology, right? Due to the advancements in biology, modern biology, the scientists gave a very clear picture stating that all functions in the body of an individual are completely regulated by the neuroendocrine system. And this neuroendocrine system is the one which achieves, number one, homeostasis, and number two, it is responsible for maintenance of proper health in a particular individual. And also to these two systems, now they started adding one more system, that is the immune system. Now, along with these two, right, along with the neuroendocrine system, what they said is the immune system, again, the immune system again plays a quite significant role, right? The immune system again plays a quite significant role in maintaining proper health of a particular person, right? So this is what they said. So totally there are three systems present in our body which are completely responsible for maintaining good health in a particular person. What are those three systems? Number one, nervous system. Number two, endocrine system. And the third one is the immune system. So all of these three systems together in a coordinated manner, they are responsible for achieving homeostasis in the body, maintaining everything in a balanced condition in the body, and also they are responsible for achieving normal health or rather good health in the particular individual. Right. So this is what we have at the basis of something related to human health. Right. So the definition of health, right? A few things pertaining to health, right? What the early scientists believed pertaining to a good health and what modern biology says about the health. Right. Now, what is the importance of being healthy? So we have a small topic in your book giving the importance of being healthy. What could be the importance of being healthy? So let us quickly go through the importance of being healthy. Right? So what is the importance of being healthy? So the first and foremost is it would increase the longevity of a person. Right? So talking about the importance of being healthy, number one, it would increase the longevity of a person. Increase in longevity. Now, what do we mean by longevity? Increase in the lifespan of a person. Only when a person is said to be healthy, right? Only when a person is said to be healthy, right? The lifespan of a person will be increased. So, number one, good health would increase the lifespan or longevity of a person. Number two, the second importance of maintaining good health, right? Or maintaining proper health. The second importance is it would decrease the infant mortality rate. It would decrease the infant mortality rate. Now, what do we mean by mortality rate? Mortality rate is nothing but the death rate. So there would be a decrease in the death rate of the infants because of increased or because of good health or proper health in a particular individual. The third one, what they have given in your books is being healthy would again increase national productivity. It would increase national productivity. So how does being healthy increase national productivity? Only if a person is healthy, the person would be more efficient in work. So whenever a person is healthy, the person can work more efficiently. Now, since a person can work more efficiently, there would be an increase in the national productivity. Right. Now, this increase in the national productivity again would lead to economic development of the country. Right? It would lead to economic development of the country. Right? So these are some of the important things what we have pertaining to the importance of being healthy. Number one, being healthy would start increasing the longevity of person. Right? Number two, it would decrease infant mortality rate. Number three, it would bring about increase in national productivity. And number four, it would bring about economic development of the country. Right. So we have seen what would be the importance of being healthy. Right. Now, how do we maintain proper health? Right. So how do we maintain proper health? So let us quickly go through the list. Right. So I hope all are familiar with things what we need to do to remain healthy. Right. A few important things comes into picture here. Right. A few important things. Right. Everyone would be clear of what we need to do to remain healthy. But still, since it is given in our books, so we'll quickly take down the list. Number 1, yoga, right? And number 2, regular exercise, right? Regular exercise would start making a person healthy. Then having proper balanced diet, right? Having proper balanced diet would again keep a person healthy, right? Fourth one, we have personal hygiene, right? So maintaining hygiene would again keep a person healthy, maintaining personal hygiene, right? And number 4, disposal or proper disposal of wastes, right? Proper disposal of waste, because we know that due to disposal of waste, there are a lot of microorganisms coming in. Again, that would lead to a lot of infections in a person. So again, proper disposal of waste is again very much essential to remain healthy, right? Then after this, a person should have, or rather we can put it this way, control of pollution, right? Control of pollution. So this is again one of the major challenges which all of the countries have been facing. But due to the current scenario, the pollution levels have been completely down, right? So that has again brought some good news pertaining to the pollution, right? So control of pollution is again another important way to remain healthy, right? Next one, knowledge about. This is one very important one. Knowledge about the diseases. Right, knowledge about the diseases is one more important way, right? So if we are able to know a particular disease and how a particular disease is being caused, we could remain healthy, right? So getting proper knowledge about diseases, right? Next one, what we can take up is the control of vectors. So what do we mean by vectors? Vectors are nothing but certain carriers, right? Carriers of infectious disease, like how we have malaria, right? So malaria is carried by a vector called as mosquito. Which mosquito? The female Anopheles mosquito. So that acts as a vector. So by controlling the vectors, again, a person can remain healthy. So control of vectors is one more. One more is there is vaccination, right? Getting vaccinated on a regular basis for against several dreadful diseases, right? Again, that could keep a person healthy, right? Vaccination could keep a person healthy, right? Then there is one more thing: limited use of natural resources. Limited use of natural resources. So this again would keep a person healthy, right? So the limited use of natural resources again could keep a person healthy, right? So a few basic things which actually keeps a person healthy, right? So performing yoga, regular exercises, of having balanced diet, personal hygiene, proper disposal of waste, the control of pollution, right? Knowledge about the diseases, the control of vectors, the vaccination, as well as the limited use of natural resources. So some of the basic things what we can do, right, to remain healthy, right? So these are, I hope all are familiar with this. So we are not going to get into much details with regards to this. Now, what are the things which actually affects the health of a person? So how is the health of a person being affected? So three things which affects the health of a person, right? So three important things which affects the health of a person. So what are the three major things which actually affects the health of a person? First one is genetic disorders, right? So genetic disorders are the key things which actually affects the health of a person. Genetic disorders. So genetic disorders, it would affect the health of a person. I hope all are familiar with genetic disorders because we have studied a lot of things with regards to this genetic disorders in our previous chapter, right? So genetic disorders is the first one which actually is responsible for, right, which is responsible for affecting the health of a person, right? It could be either congenital disease or it could be either an acquired disease. By birth, a person would be affected by this genetic disorder, or again, due to some sort of mutations, this genetic disorder may be seen, right? So the second thing that affects the health of a person is infections, right? So infections again would start affecting the health of a person. So when we say infection, right, it is nothing but getting infected by any sort of microorganism or the pathogen, what we call it is, right? So again, whenever this microorganisms comes into our body, It could be either a virus or a bacteria or a fungi, whatever it is, right? Whenever this microorganisms comes into our body, the person is prone to some sort of infection. Because of that infection, again, the health of a person would be uh, bad, right? We can put it this way, right? The person becomes unhealthy. The third thing that affects the health of a person is one very important thing here. It is the lifestyle of an individual, right? So the lifestyle again plays a very important role in maintaining the health of a person. Now, what do we mean by this lifestyle? The food that we eat, the water that we drink, right? So the amount of rest that we give, or the duration of rest that we give to our bodies, or the things such as related to the exercises that we give to our body, all falls under the category of lifestyle. Right. So if a person has to be healthy, as we have already discussed, proper yoga is required, regular exercise is required, proper diet is required, right? So all those would keep a person healthy. So if any of the things are said to be imbalanced, it would again drastically show its effect on the health of a person, right? So three important things which are responsible for affecting the health of a person: genetic disorders, second one is infections, and the third one is lifestyle of a particular person, right? So this is what we have with the first part of our title, which is the health part. Now let's take up with the second part pertaining to diseases, right? So let us talk a few things, a few introductory note pertaining to diseases, right? Now we have seen that the health of a person is very essential, right? The health of a person is very essential, right? So when does a person becomes unhealthy? We saw three important things. When there is genetic disorders, a person becomes unhealthy. When there is infections, the person becomes unhealthy. When there is some sort of differences in the lifestyle, again, the person would become unhealthy. So whenever we talk about disease, we'll be focusing on the second point, what we have just seen, infections, right? So this infections would lead to the disease. So if we have to define a disease, how do we define a disease? How do we define disease? So a disease can be defined as any deviation from the normal functioning of the vital activities of the body. This is how we actually define a disease, right? So what is a disease all about now? So a disease can be defined as any deviation, right? Any deviation. So what do we mean by deviation? Moving away, right? Any deviation from what? The normal functioning of vital activities in the body, right? So any sort of deviation from the normal functioning of the vital activities in the body, we start calling it as a disease. Now let's just imagine that in our body, say suppose the functioning of a process is happening. Say A undergoes some sort of a reaction, would give rise to B. Now B would give rise to C, C would give rise to D, D to E, and E to F. So this is the normal pathway, right? Normal process in our body. But any deviation from this path, right? Any deviation from this path would lead to the development of disease. Say A is regularly giving rise to B, B is giving rise to C. But what is happening? C is not giving rise to D, rather C is giving rise to something called as X. Right? And this path will now start continuing. So there is a deviation from here. Right? So there is a deviation happening. So this would lead to a condition called as a disease. So this is how we actually define a disease. So what is a disease now? Any deviation, right? Any deviation from normal functioning of the vital activities in the body is called as a disease. Now, what would be the outcome of this disease? Right? What would be the outcome of the disease? Diseases would, or this sort of a deviation, right? This sort of a deviation, it would bring about some sort of disturbances. Disturbances in what? Disturbances in homeostasis. Right? So this sort of a deviation, right? So this sort of a deviation would lead to, or it would bring about the disturbances in the homeostasis, right? So the balance in the body is actually not being maintained. Now, if the balance in the body is not being maintained, what would happen? It would make a person unhealthy, right? It would make a person unhealthy. It would make a person sick, right? So this is how we actually define a disease. So how is a disease defined? It is defined as any sort of deviation, right? Any sort of a deviation from the normal functioning of the vital activities in the body is called as a disease, right? Now this disease or this sort of a deviation would bring about some sort of disturbances in the homeostasis in the body. Due to this disturbances, what would happen? A person would start becoming unhealthy. Now, what could be the reason for this disturbances? Or what could be the reason for this particular deviation? Right? Scientists, most of the scientists say that the reason for this deviation or the reason for this particular disturbances would be basically or would be mostly because of infections. Right? It would be mostly because of infection. So as we have already said, infection is nothing but getting infected by any sort of microorganisms, right? So whenever there is any microorganisms entering into our body, it would bring about this disturbances in the homeostasis, making a person unhealthy. Right. So there are other factors also which are responsible for this sort of disturbances. One is infection. The second one would be pollutants. Pollutants also would lead to some sort of disturbances, because we know that we have already studied about a lot of things about pollution: air pollution, soil pollution, water pollution, right? Noise pollution. All that would start bringing about some sort of disturbances in the homeostasis, making a person unhealthy. Pollutants is another cause for this sort of a disturbances. Another cause for the disturbances would be improper diet, right? So improper diet would again be the reason for this sort of disturbances in the homeostasis, right? Improper diet, right? Along with that, we also have something called as the hereditary diseases. Hereditary diseases, right? What are hereditary diseases? The diseases which are passed on from generation to generation, inherited diseases, right? So inherited diseases also would sometimes bring about this sort of disturbances in the homeostasis. Along with that, if the immunity is being reduced, right? So reduced immunity would again make a person unhealthy, right? Due to the disturbances in homeostasis. That is the reason why in the current situation what we are facing, most of the scientists and doctors, what they are telling is eat foods which would increase our immune system, so that our immune system would have proper ability to fight against this particular pandemic what we are actually facing, the COVID-19 pandemic. So in individuals with reduced immunity, again they would have some sort of disturbances in the homeostasis, again making a person unhealthy. And the last one what we can take is the neuroendocrine disorders, right? So the neuroendocrine disorders, so disorders pertaining to the nervous system as well as the endocrine system. So these neuroendocrine disorders also could bring about some sort of disturbances in the homeostasis, right? Because we have seen that, right? The scientists said that the proper functioning of the body is completely regulated by the neuroendocrine system. So if there is some sort of defects in the neuroendocrine system, the entire that homeostasis is actually being lost. It is being disturbed, right? So these are a few things what we have with regards to disease. So how do we define a disease now? A disease can be defined as any deviation from the normal functioning of the vital activities in the body. And this deviation would bring about some sort of disturbances in the homeostasis. And the cause for these disturbances would be infections, pollutants, improper diet, hereditary disease, reduced immunity, neuroendocrine disorder. These are just a few to name. Apart from this, there are several other things also which makes or which brings about this sort of disturbances in homeostasis, and it would start making a person unhealthy, right? So this is what we have, a brief introduction pertaining to the disease. So we'll stop here for today. In the next session, we'll continue with the disease, right? So we have something called as the classification of disease. So we'll start classifying diseases into different categories, and we'll take a few examples in each of the category and study with regards to those particular examples, right? Fine. Thank you.